More and more athletes have been using their fame to help shine the spotlight on a host of political issues, as we saw when stars like Lebron James and his then teammates on the Heat showed solidarity with Trayvon Martin, all posing in hoodies, or the dozens of NFL players who took knees during the national anthem over the past few years. But as my next guest argues, politics have always been at the core of sports for black athletes, and even first getting onto the field was a political statement in and of itself. ESPN senior writer Howard Bryant's new book is called The Heritage: Black Athletes, A Divided America, and the Politics of Patriotism. And he writes, in sports, the scoreboard served as a metaphor for the meritocracy America always considered itself, and sports was the barometer from where African Americans stood in the larger culture, how American they would be allowed to be. Howard Bryant is also a correspondent for NPR's Weekend Edition. Joins me now. Howard, congratulations yet again. What is the Heritage?
Well, the Heritage is the lineage of black athletes who put themselves into this political, well, actually were put into political positions, whether we're talking about Paul Robeson or Jackie Robinson, Muhammad Ali. And then we had this gap where Republicans buy shoes too, and O.J. Simpson didn't want to get involved, and Michael Jordan didn't want to get involved, and Tiger Woods didn't want to get involved. And then suddenly, with the clash of police shootings and everything happening, suddenly we see a revival with Colin Kaepernick and a lot of athletes today.
Can we go back to the first of those pivotal moments? You say O.J. had created a new template, the colorless black athlete. Explain that a little bit.
Well, what it means is that once players began making money, as we saw in the mid-'70s with free agency, when all of a sudden now these guys were super rich, suddenly the athlete, and I make the argument in the book that the black athlete is the most important black employee and most influential black employee in American history, because they were the ones who were integrating society, whether it was the military or whether it was higher education or sports.
Does that statement you just made trouble you?
It does, absolutely, and it should, and especially the fact that especially when we're in a culture now when people say shut up and play, these are the guys who have the money, and we listen to people with money. These are the guys with the influence. These are the people that we all pay attention to.
So how did O.J. He changed it for decades?
And he changed it for decades because he had access. He was the one who was the. Of course, he had other problems later, but before that, he was the guy who got the commercials. In 1967, Red Sox Cardinals, Bob Gibson wins the MVP. Carl Yastrzemski got more endorsements. Until O.J., black players didn't have the access to the money in the bigger white world.
And that trickled down onto the Michael Jordans, as you say, the Tiger Woodses, and those.
Well, it's the rise of corporations. We always talk about, if you look at the history of sports, you have the immigration story, the integration story, and then this third one is the money story. Mm-hmm. And O.J. and Michael and Tiger and Reggie Jackson and all those great players began to usher in that money story. And with the money comes the corporations, and with corporations becomes a lot less risk in terms of getting involved in political issues.
When you were a kid, when you wanted Jordan to say something as the hero for almost everybody, you have a smile on your face? Did it bother you?
Was it a kid when Jordan was
whatever.
Did it was a Larry Bird, Robert Parrish guy.
I was. Did it bother you when a Jordan-esque figure who had a bully pulpit as big as any in the world, not just in the United States, chose to just be a brand as opposed to try to change the world?
Well, it certainly started to bother me when I got older, when you recognized how we listened to these athletes, how much influence they had. 100% it bothered me. And it bothers me now that I have children, and I have a child, and people look at these players and they want to hear from them.
You make the case also that 9/11 was one of the most important moments for sports, not just for society.
Now,
and
yeah.
Tell us why. Huh?
Well, because 9/11, if you look at where we are today in sports, and suddenly you look around and I say, why is everybody wearing camo all the time? Because 9/11 changed how sports is marketed. 9/11 changed how sports are played and how sports are sold to the public. And what this book is really about, if you had to break it down to one sentence, is it is post-9/11 America colliding with the post-Ferguson black athlete. You've got the flags the size of the 50-yard line. You've got police. You've got military. You've got first responders, all on the sports field. And that doesn't necessarily jibe with the relationship between the black community and police. And it all collides in a place where we were supposed to be having fun.
And that's what gave rebirth to the Heritage.
Absolutely.
After that several decades was the Trayvons and the Eric Garners. And
that's right.
And it became, when a black athlete said that I don't want to live in a country that allows police officers to brutalize young black men.
Get paid vacations. Colin Kaepernick said that, sure.
They were viewed as unpatriotic in that post-9/11 thing, were they not?
Absolutely they were. And what was very interesting about this is that you have this collision taking place at a time when the sports leagues are actually making money off of patriotism. And so suddenly,
Literally
making money off of patriotism because the Department of Defense has decided that sports is a great place to recruit soldiers. And so it's a very funny spot to be in when you see this collision at a place where people were supposed to be. Sports isn't supposed to be the place where we have these political battles, but it's the most political spot in America, I think.
And we only have a minute left. No one reads this, in my estimation, better than Donald Trump. No one reads it and exploits it better than that collision you're talking about.
And that's the whole question. And one of the things that I really enjoyed is that as much as we talk about divisions in this country, whether you're Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, the one thing that people have agreed on in working on this book is that they do not want patriotism, nationalism for sale at the ballpark. And that's the one thing that we see much in sports today that's got to stop.
One last thing. How does somebody like a Lebron James decide not to shut up and dribble as compared to John Doe, who says, I'm going to play my game, cash my checks, that's it? What's the difference between those two people?
The number of zeros on your paycheck. You can replace pretty much everybody else, but you can't replace LeBron James.
That's a good point. Howard Bryant, it's great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank
the book
you, Jim.
is terrific. Appreciate it. The book, again, is The Heritage, Black Athletes, A Divided America, and the Politics of Patriotism. You can see Howard at the Harvard Bookstore in person this coming Monday, June 11th at 7. Mission's free. You can find more information at harvard.com/events. And you can hear him for another 15 minutes or so tomorrow on Boston Public Radio.